All right, let's go ahead and get started. We're going to pick up here in just a second with what we talked about last week. We just keep rolling. As Leanne said, what we did Sunday, I appreciate the feedback on it. It got a lot of feedback. It took a long time to get out of here on Sunday morning. People stuck around and wanted to talk. At the end of the day, as I told you guys, the purpose of that, and even this, is we have a great opportunity here at 434. We get to be in a place that is kind of a greenhouse to grow a little bit. It's safe. We're able to be family. You can be loved. You can be yourself because you guys are messed up, and we can be that and have the freedom to do that. And that's a gift. That really is a gift. I don't know where your church experiences are in the past, but I'm telling you that is a gift, and I'm telling you that the church in America is a mess today. It really is. And I love the mess. Jesus died for that mess, and there's no doubt about it. But it is a mess if you've ever had to deal, and I have. And I've had to navigate those kind of things. And so I really feel like one of the niches that we have is to be able to answer that question, because we're coming after this year 3 of this pandemic, post-pandemic. Who knows? And people have come out differently. It has stripped down the church in some ways. Right now, statistically, 38% of the pastors in churches are either resigning or leaving, never to come back to church because the pandemic wore them smack out or exposed the fact that they didn't know how to lead. That's 38%. So when you hear the news start talking about the hiring crisis that's out there, hear me very carefully. That's almost 40% of the churches in America now has a hiring crisis, and the answer is not solved as we've been trying to solve it for the last 15 years in churches, because the last 15 years in churches, all it took to get a job in church is a pair of skinny jeans, and we grew you within and we like you. That was a prerequisite. You didn't have to know anything. You didn't have to be a leader. You didn't have to have any depth. You just had to be light. And we'd prop you up and we'd give you a job and we'd put you on the payroll. Well, that has come back to roost for us as a church in America, which is why people are leaving the church in droves. It's not because no one's intentions were bad. Now, it was never it. But we got comfortable, as we talk about culture, right? We got comfortable in the culture, and we want to be liked. Every parent in the room understands that there is a moment where you've had to give truth to your children, and they did not like it. And as a result, they did not like you. For that moment, they come back around. Now, why did they come back around to love you? Hopefully they came back around to love you. But why did they come back around? Because you didn't quit. Right? And I think the church in America in some ways has quit. We can speak truth, but we have to speak the truth in love, and we have to keep doing it, and we have to be consistent. But see, people change churches faster than they change underwear or email addresses. And they go different places so quick because they're always shopping for the next best thing. What a novel idea for people to come to church because they're called of God to come somewhere. So while everyone's changing because they're looking for something different, some flashier song, some better looking somebody, a better looking pastor, hard to find, one who will dress in a suit, whatever they're looking for. I got all that, and I understand we are a consumer-driven culture, but I got news for you. The pandemic proved that be consumers, we don't have to leave our homes anymore. So why make the effort to go to church? Because there's got to be something there worth going to. And the church has to be the dispenser of truth, and we have to do it in love, and we have to do it unashamedly. Make no apologies. So yes, this week I have been called a racist, I have been called a homophobe, I've been called a sexist. I can own none of those things, but you can call me those things if you would like. And people did. And I don't know these people. Why would people I don't know take the time to tell me they hate me? That is absolutely insane to me. But I've responded to all of them. Hey, keep watching. You ain't seen nothing yet. If I got you week 1, get ready, because it's only going to get worse from here. And it will be a fireball. Somebody wrote me. That wasn't anything to leave over. Oh, you're going to go out the door? Okay. People, I had an interesting conversation with someone, and it did turn into a conversation where they said, I never heard what you said about Karl Marx before. And we tried, and some of you had this conversation with me. I mean, we did this as an illustration that I didn't use Sunday morning in any worship service, but I would have used. If you're in a school setting, if you're in a classroom setting, and I were to give to you, because I know that every class wants to use a book called The Disney Code, written by me. And so if they would take the book I wrote and they would hand it to you to read as an assignment, they would preface it with this phrase. This is written by a Christian pastor who is a Disney fan in the Orlando area. We're going to read this and we're going to study it and there's going to be a test on it. Now what they've done when they did that is they preloaded the book for you. Okay? What did they do? Well, Christian, all right, odd for God. Pastor, oh, really odd for God. Disney fan, fanatic. Orlando area, Disney World geek. But you knew every page you turned, okay, it's going to come from a godly perspective. It's going to be a Christian slanted book. A little bit of self-help is going to be in there because most pastors will throw that in. And it's going to be pro-Disney. I mean, no one's going to be taking shots at Bob Iger or, Michael Eisner or anything like that. I mean, you knew what you're going to get. They preloaded the book for you. And you would read it, and you would read it through that filter. You would know that reading the book, and you would remember that. You go, oh, this guy, he loves Disney too much, or he didn't take the shot he should have taken there. I mean, you would think that as you read the book. All of you would do that. I would do that. But you hand you a copy of the Communist Manifesto, and this is how you preface it. This is written by a modern philosopher. Okay, great. And you read it through that. You read it through, this is a modern, contemporary philosopher who has a philosophy of education, a philosophy of government, a philosophy of how things are done, and you read through that filter. You do that. That's happening right now in our school system, by the way. So when I used the illustration Sunday about people in our church who have actually been assigned that book, as of right now, that's the truth. However, if they'd have handed you that book and said, hey, by the way, this is written by a avowed Satanist who hates God and hates the government, and this is their philosophy. It's called the Communist Manifesto. And by the way, he called it the Communist Manifesto because the original title was the Contemporary Guide to Communism, written in some kind of form. I mean, it was a terrible title that would have revealed exactly what was in it, but they changed it because they knew it wouldn't get picked up. But if they gave you that disclaimer and you pick the book up and goes, well, gosh, this was written by a guy who's a Satanist, who hates the government, who's an anarchist, every page you read, then you would let that be the filter that you go through. But we don't give you that filter. Well, why not? Because then you have to ask yourself the question. Point one on Sunday is we're going to talk about the original conspiracy theory. And so, as I said, it just gets better from here. But the point of that is simply just to say we have to know these things because, if the people of God aren't armed with truth, where do we get our truth from? I mean, if we're not going to be operating in areas of truth, where is it going to come from? Because someone will fill that gap. They already are. And if it's not us, then the question is who? Call me egotistical, but I want it to be us. I want it to be that. I got news for you. Tommy and I had this conversation last night. I have a son in a public school, but I position myself in that public school to have a heck of a lot of clout. And I can promise you, if there's a problem, they have a bigger problem. Now, I may lose the battle, but it will be a war. True? I mean, there's not, we don't have to roll over and apologize for what we believe or apologize for the truth. But we've been apologizing for the truth for a while, and we've been afraid to say it. So, somebody sent me a nice email and tore into me and said, well, you attacked Karl Marx because he's a Satanist, but you didn't really attack his form of government. So I just went back and said, when has it worked? I mean, give me one illustration where it works. One, just one. I've been waiting 2 days. I mean, you can fabricate it, you know. Now again, you know, I got it. And the stat I'm going to give you Sunday, 61% of millennials in America, people, or actually, no, that's not wrong. 61% of people under the age of 24 in America think socialism is a good idea. That's the world we work in. Some of you have kids that age. That's their environment. Maybe them. I mean, that's our world. That's the playground that we're called to minister into. And so, I will continue talking about that on Sunday mornings. So be with us. There'll be more drawings. This will be great. But tonight, we're going to pick up where we left off. Now, last week, we started this course entitled, Are We Living in a World that is a nation that's over God, or are we willing to live in a nation that's under God? Or you can do it the other way. Under God, over God, over God, under God. You can do it whatever you want makes you feel good. And I said I was going to give you, by the time we were done, 7 parallels, or not parallels, 7 cultural level lines, thank you, that allowed us to see whether or not we're over or under God, that actually emerged that were trends in Nazi Germany. Not because we're Nazis, not because there's somebody out there that's acting like Hitler right now. That's not it. But there were some things, and I made the point that what happened in Nazi Germany, we would say, can't happen in our culture today. But you know, there were some things that happened in Nazi Germany that set the tone for Hitler to rise to power. And last week we talked about it. So last week I gave you the first one, and I think the first one I gave you was, if God is separated from government, judgment follows. And we illustrated that. We illustrated that with the churches. Let me read to you actually something that we shared back in the series way back when, that kind of prompted what started this series. It was that letter about how the churches dealt with what was happening in Nazi Germany after it got bad. Okay? It's a letter, actually. It says this. It's an eyewitness account of how members of the church reacted to Nazism. I lived in Germany during the Nazi Holocaust, and I considered myself a Christian. We heard stories of what was happening to the Jews, but we tried to distance ourselves from it, because what could anyone do to stop it? A railroad track ran behind our small church each Sunday morning, and we could hear the whistle in the distance, and then the wheels coming over the tracks. We became disturbed when we heard the cries coming from the train as it passed by, and we realized that it was carrying Jews like cattle in the cars. Week after week, the whistle would blow. We dreaded to hear the sound of those wheels because we knew that we would hear the cries of Jews en route to a death camp. Their screams tormented us. We knew the time the train was coming, and when we heard the whistle blow, we began singing hymns. By the time the train came past our church, we were singing at the top of our voices. If we heard the screams, we sang more loudly, and soon we could hear them no more. Years have passed, and no one talks about it anymore, but I still hear that train whistle in my sleep. God, forgive me. Forgive all of us who call ourselves Christians yet did nothing to intervene. Now, that's brutal. How do you deal with what you know are people on the way to death camps? You just sing louder. And what a horrible testimony, but yet a very honest appraisal. The question is, for us, let's kind of just pull that fast forward. No, we're not going to put people in death camps. No, that's not going to happen. And that's not where we are. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm simply saying this. But aren't we really guilty of singing just louder and acting like nothing's wrong? And the church has kind of developed a hunker-down mentality while we have watched slowly but surely God slowly kind of get pulled and separated out of things. And don't kid yourself. You know, God can handle himself. He doesn't need our help. But by the same token, it would be silly to think that God's not going to do some judgment on that. I mean, there is a moment where God judges that. And so with keeping that in mind, we kind of talked about what we did last week, but I told you we had many, many miles to go. And so we're not going to review any more than that. I want to give you another level line. We talked about moving God out of the mix and what that can mean. So let me give you another level line that really does apply, and then you can try to figure out how does that work in the world that we're in today. Are we living over God or under God? And here would be that level line. It's always the economy. It's always the economy. Imagine this scenario. Inflation is out of control. The price of bread, milk, and vegetables, when available, runs into thousands of dollars. Candles and combustible household furnishings are replacing heat and electricity as public utilities are closed to unattainable wage and labor demands. As those demands rise from an inflationary cycle fueled by fear, frustration, unemployment numbers continue to rise daily at a frightening speed. Disease now runs rampant. Hospitals are not only closed but also abandoned. Medicine, or what remains of medicine, is being hoarded by the privileged few or traded in or bartered to use in transactions. The rich hide behind their gated communities, and vigilante groups are formed to protect the haves from the have-nots who are roaming the streets, destroying property, killing randomly, and stealing and looting. Where the porous border, drug lords come from Mexico and wreak destruction and find what they can steal among the chaos. Nearly all public services, such as schools, police, fire, emergency networks, have likewise been discontinued as the infrastructure of a civilized society rapidly disintegrates. Even the remnant of federal militia cannot enforce martial law. Thus, chaos and crime explode on the scene as families and family units implode. Relatives huddle together trying to survive, and those who have friends or relatives outside the big cities flee hoping to save their lives and sanity. People are angry, very angry. That anger is primarily directed at the government, a government that promised life and liberty and the pursuit of happiness, but also stability and maybe even prosperity. And people are angry when they realize that their government is hopelessly indebted to foreign countries. Multiple billions of dollars were borrowed as though they didn't have to be repaid. These billions owed have become trillions, and the day of reckoning has come. Hostile crowds demand that the banks allow them to withdraw their funds in cash, but of course the banks have long since run out of hard currency, even though the dollar is devalued almost weekly, if not daily. People are demanding action. The populace feels betrayed. Even when the president speaks, few hear him. For electronic communication is unreliable. Even so, those who do hear him don't believe what he says, and why would they trust his words? That promise has become a lie. Now, I am sure if you had that background, most of the population in America today would be willing to suspend civil liberties like freedom, speech, freedom of assembly, and freedom of worship, and free elections in exchange for the stability of having what they need to survive. Why? Because it's about the economy. Always has been. And one of the things that you have to remember or know if you are a historian is that if that is the background, then any dictator who could give credible evidence that he could bring order out of the chaos, we'd be willing to say, do your thing, we'll follow you. That's the way it works. So when I say that, if that is true, and I think a lot of that is true, then let's not be too quick to condemn those who are willing to give Hitler a chance, giving the economic chaos that Germany was going through after World War I, because he never could have come to power had the German economy remained strong after World War I. He rode to victory simply because he promised to rebuild the collapsing German mark and put the nation back to work. It was the German economy that gave rise to National Socialism. Now, we don't know that about history for the most part. We are not up on history. We don't pay attention to history, just like we don't pay attention to who Karl Marx was. But for Germany, the mark was in a free fall. And when the market was in free fall, the government kept printing money. And even though it had no value, it could figure out no way out of the chaos, and the people longed for a leader to emerge, someone that would have a plan, someone that could put an end to the charade and begin something that would get them on the road to recovery. And there was a guy in Germany who was waiting for that moment. And he saw it, and he seized it. His name, of course, is Adolf Hitler. And an economic crisis is always a gift to anybody who wants to capture a nation. American politicians know it. The phrase, "it's the economy, stupid," is the phrase that is often used, and you're going to hear it through this next election cycle. The question they're going to start asking you, are you better off now than you were 2 years ago since the last election? And you're going to be, as a voter, asked to answer that question honestly, legitimately. And as a follower of Christ, who gets my votes? Who's been the best? with allowing me to use the resources that God has entrusted me with to do what I'm called to do with? See, it's a spiritual question for you as a Christian who are a voter. And I'm not calling you stupid, but it is the economy. If you go back in history, Hitler holds a fascination for us because he was a dictator that had wide support of the people. I mean, Hitler has a place in history unlike very few because he had a rare gift of motivating a nation of people to follow him, and he did evil things, but yet people went along with it. And Hitler not only got the support of the lower class, but he also got the middle class, and he also got the university students and the professors. And here's what Hitler did that was brilliant. He used democracy as the path to dictatorship. He used the free voting power and the free economy that Germany had to manipulate it and drive it and work behind the scenes to turn it into something that it wasn't. The economic depression of 1929 opened the door for Hitler. Now, let's just stop for a minute. Let's go back to American history again. I don't know if you're well versed of 1929 or the Great Depression here in America as it came back. I did not have to live through it, thank goodness. I've heard tales, I've heard stories, I've had relatives that would tell those stories, and it was a horrible time. I watched the Waltons. So I have a real good sense of what happened in the Great Depression. But here's a fact, and again, there's no politics in this, it's a fact. Out of the Great Depression, America put into place some of the social programs that continue to this day, and they have only gotten bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and unmanageable, by the way. And right now, fairly unsustainable, because you can go back to that opening illustration. I wasn't talking about America, but I could have been, because we've now borrowed into the trillions. So my son, praise God, is not going to have to pay for the debt we run up today. His children will. I'll be dead and gone before they get here because I'm an old man and he's a young kid. But we've now pushed it back that generation. We've pushed it back that far. So it's okay for us, right? Payday someday. And who are we borrowing from? Our best friends, China. Now again, let's go back now to Nazi Germany. When you look at Hitler, and you take what he did in the economy, his report card, and again, I don't want to oversell this because we don't know this about Hitler, or most people don't know this about Hitler, okay? Many people saw Hitler, including Christians, as an answer to their prayers. Because Hitler was the guy who came in. Some Christians in Germany actually took down the pictures of Jesus from their wall and put up pictures of Adolf Hitler. Winston Churchill observed that Hitler, in 1937, said that his accomplishments were the most remarkable accomplishments in the whole history of the world. Adolf Hitler. Hitler's brand of socialism had many advantages for the German people. He nationalized the banks. He instituted wage and price controls. He centralized the economy. Does that sound like, oh, forget it. National Socialism could bypass the often slow democratic process, and by executive orders he could get things done quickly. Despite Hitler's gross crimes, he did have an economic policy that appeared to work, at least for the first few years. Listen to what he did. This is his report card. 1, he revived a collapsed economy in less than 4 years. 2, he instituted national health care. 3, he gave millions of Germans attractive vacations through his Strength Through Joy program, a vacation on the government. 4, he established training schools for those who were unskilled and brought the nation to full employment. 5, he brought crime under control. 6, he instituted a huge public works program and built freeways and promised the production of a car that ordinary Germans would soon be able to afford. 7, he gave Germans a reason to believe in themselves, to believe that they would become great again. If only Hitler would have died before World War II, we would have called him Adolf the Great. perhaps the most outstanding figure in all of German history. But he didn't die. And for Hitler, none of it was an accident. Because if he was anything, he was an evil genius. Remember Sunday? Satan has his schemes and his plans. And I told you that Sunday, Satan keeps running the same playbook over and over and over again. You know where Hitler got his playbook, don't you? Out of the Bible. He got his playbook out of the history of what the Antichrist is supposed to do. Bring unity. Be that figure that can mobilize people around you. Be the person with the solutions. Be the person with the answer. Only then to turn the pages. And by the time it was over with, by the time World War II was over with, he had gotten the German people, because he had done such a great job for them, right? To turn over their personal rights and freedoms. And he enacted laws that exterminated more than 8 to 11 million people. And he had put Germany in a war that killed over 50 million people in the greatest bloodbath in all of history. He didn't die until thousands of pastors joined the SS troops in swearing personal allegiance to him. What began as an economic miracle ended with a moral and political nightmare. And as long as the economy was strong, people didn't care. And for Germany, if you go back and look at the history, Germany ran for a while because they had freedom of speech, freedom of travel, freedom of elections. The majority of the Lutheran churches sided with Hitler. A few pastors didn't. We talked a little bit about them last week. They started what they called the Confessing Church. And that breakaway church opposed Hitler. They formed their own councils. They wrote protests. And they continued to fight the intrusion of Nazism into the church in 1938 when the German pastors were mandated by Hitler to swear personal allegiance to Hitler. This commission basically wimped out and refused to take a stand. And what they did instead is they said to each individual pastor, you get to make your own individual choice whether you're going to be loyal to Hitler or not. And so some signed their allegiance to Hitler, and those that did not basically had provided the Gestapo the opportunity to identify any pastor who didn't swear loyalty to Hitler. And they came to arrest him, and they sentenced him to whatever the people's court would decide. Over 800 pastors were arrested and imprisoned. And what did Germany think of the fact that 800 pastors were arrested and sent to prison? They didn't care. They didn't care because things were going good. Things were going well. And you know what? They didn't really need the church anymore. They needed Hitler. Because the government was now providing their needs. Remember last week I talked about the fact that the government moved and Hitler said, church, you do what you want. I'm going to take care of the German people. You just kind of keep God inside the walls. And as a result, Germany reached a point where Christianity was no longer worth suffering for. It wasn't worth dying for. And it wasn't worth fighting for. And people were much more willing to read the writings of Hitler than they were to read the Bible. And they were willing to exchange the glory of God for the greater glory of Germany. I'm not talking about us, but I am talking about our culture. Do you think for a moment that our culture is not willing to close their eyes to warning signs as long as they have a strong economy and money in the bank? Because that's who we are. It's the economy. Stupid is the word that they use. That showed up during the 1992 presidential campaign for the first time, when somebody was smart enough to realize that people vote with their pocketbooks. That's how voting cycles work. They vote with their pocketbooks. Money, which is essential for us to live, also is a great tool to get people to vote. Now, the United States is not Germany, and so there are parallels, but Satan was right when he said, all that a man has, he will give for his life. Satan made that comment in Job 2:4. That's a quote of Satan. See, survival is a powerful drive. And a lot of people are willing to compromise everything that they've got. And if the government can guarantee our financial future, we support it. Even if we know, that it might be taking us down a dangerous path. Benjamin Franklin said, any society that would give up a little liberty to gain a little security will deserve neither and lose both. The Bible doesn't specify what type of economic theory should be adopted by governments, but there are some principles that the Bible gives us that ought to apply to anything that we do financially. First of all, there are personal warnings against debt in Scripture that ought to be widely heeded. And I think it's wrong to spend our children's money. But the good news is, as I told you, we're not spending my kids' money now, we're spending my grandkids' money now. Because that's the structure that we have. Incredibly, we who are known as one of the wealthiest countries on earth have borrowed billions of dollars, globally to stay afloat. We might think we should be lending that kind of money to other places, not borrowing. Listen to what God said to Israel. For the Lord your God will bless you as he promised you, and you shall lend to many nations, but you shall not borrow. And you shall rule over many nations, but they will not rule over you. Why wouldn't the other nations rule over them? Because the nations didn't owe them anything. But when you owe someone something, it does change the way that you deal with them, does it not? Turn on your news tonight and start listening real close to people start talking about the policies and the things that we're doing globally, and then ask yourself the question, how much money do we owe them? And what happens next? One of the greatest thrillers was written by Brad Thor a few years ago. I think Brad Thor died. No? Vince Flynn died. Vince Flynn died. Brad Thor's still around, I think. I may have that backwards. But anyway, one of the greatest thrillers they wrote was when China called due the debt to the U.S. government. And an intricate plot began to take over the U.S. government. Thank goodness Scott Horvath was around to save the day. Second, fictional character. The biblical warnings against bribes should also be applied to government. It's wrong for politicians to use our money and reward their supporters. I'll say it again. It's wrong for politicians to use our money and reward their supporters. Every dollar that you've given to a politician that's been used to reward a supporter for something you don't believe in, you should hold that politician accountable for that. Something wrong with that? I think it's common sense, isn't it? Third, stealing. Even if it's from the rich, it should be forbidden. Stealing is wrong. Yes, much can be said for a graduated income tax scale, but if that tax scale is used unfairly to equalize everyone, guess what it is? It's not capitalism, it's socialism. And it's wrong biblically. Now, you don't hear that all the time, now do you? But as we start looking at things, the economy often trumps matters of liberty and principle because money is so integral to who we are. So there's some lessons for that. And it's simple, right? The bigger the government, the more dependent we are on government control. And when a bureaucracy feeds on itself, the government, which is accountable only to itself, is notoriously inefficient at running its own affairs. And what is the joke? We're the government. We're here to help. No, they're not. DMV. No, they're not. Hey, ever get your license renewed? You ever go on the IRS website? I mean, there's nothing simple about any of this. We're the government. We're here to help. No, you're not. There's nothing you're doing that's helping me. We simply live in a world where we've got things upside down. The talk on our news, you hear about the nationalized health care program in America right now. It was hotly debated a couple of years ago, the Affordable Care Act. It got insurance for a lot of people. And whether it's going to work or not is still unfolding. But historically, move America and what we're doing now to the side, because time's going to tell whether it's going to work or not. And for some of you, that hits very close to home. I got it. I have family who's benefited from the Affordable Health Care Act. They say it saved me money because I'd have to help them with bills, which is great. But historically, Great Britain has been using it for years. In the British version of national health care, people receive minimum treatment. Those over the age 60 are routinely denied heart surgery because at that age, a heart procedure after age 60 or 61 is cost ineffective. You just take what you've got and roll with it. As expected, Hitler took rationing of health care to the extreme and eliminated those who were no longer worthy of state-funded benefits. It was called the T4 bill. Hitler stipulated that the elderly with an incurable disease or young children who were disabled should be euthanized. With expanded government control comes a loss of liberty and a loss of work ethic. And it's seen in communist countries all the time. And that is what Hitler used to move forward and to secure power. See, our founders talked about being equal, that we're all equal under the law, and we should be equal to pursue life, liberty, and happiness. But today the word has come to mean economic equality. And that's not what they said. We want that if you're at the lower end of the money spectrum. You don't want to give that up. If you're at the higher end of the money spectrum, you want to have some say in who does what. And so then the question is, who meets the needs? And that's where the church is supposed to come in. But Hitler kept expanding government, and what he did was basically set up a regime that could control its citizens, and it controlled its citizens through the payroll. Hebrews 13:5 and 6 says this, keep our life free from love of money. Be content with what you have. Jesus said, I'll never leave you or forsake you. So we can confidently say that the Lord is my helper. I will not fear. What can man do to me? See, one of the hardest roads to push back against is that one that comes along when people need help and the government meets that need. Hitler used it to become a dictator. And so, when you start looking, are we living a life that's over God or under God? How's your economy? How are you doing money? Are you being faithful with it? Are you honoring God with it? Are you trusting Him and doing with the things that He has given you and the resources He's given you and using them in a way that's going to honor Him, or are you not? And we're out of time. So we only got one in tonight.
7, huh?
We're in deep, deep trouble, but we'll be all right. Let's pray and then we'll get out of here. God, you are good to us and we don't deserve it, but we want to make sure that what we do honors you. And so help us to think and help us to stretch and help us to be willing to see that in the world around us, there are a lot of opportunities. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen. Oh, and by the way, don't walk out here with the wrong idea. I didn't get this far tonight, but the takeaway at the end of the next point is very simply, this is the best time to be alive. It's not bleak. This is the greatest opportunity we've had in the history of the United States of America. That's where we are right now. Okay? So let me leave that with you before you walk out the door and just go, oh my gosh, what are we going to do? And hey, and by the way, and if you don't think it is, you need to get back here then. Because if you don't think it is, you're part of the problem, not the solution. All right, get out. Everybody go. All right, yeah. Yeah.